Introducing the new Volvo XC90 with 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
Prime delivery is fast. How fast are we talking? We're talking puzzle toys and lick pad delivered so fast you can get this puppy under control fast. Pee pads, cooling mat, peg hammer, fast and fast. And those training TREATS, faster than you can say sit fast. Fast, free delivery. It's on Prime.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Diet Coke. You know that moment when you just need to hit pause and refresh? An ice-cold Diet Coke isn't just a break. It's your chance to catch your breath and savor a moment that's all about you. Always refreshing, still the same great taste. Diet Coke. Make time for you time.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We are so excited to bring you this show.
Our podcast is all about unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed games. Each episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Assassin's Creed universe. From Pieces of Eden, solar flares, and the Isu, to the Hidden Ones, the Order of Ancients, and of course, the Animus. We will seek to uncover it all.
So join us, and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Shelby. You also know me as She-Cup. I'm here with my co-host for another episode.
Hey, I am Austin, also known as Teacup.
That's right, and we are here to continue our historical characters. Not really deep dives because some of these are not really in the Assassin's Creed universe, but we're talking about all kinds of historical characters this season. We've covered George Washington, we've covered Cleopatra, and we've covered Charles III of France. So, Austin, who are we talking about today?
So we are going a little west across the Atlantic Ocean and forward several hundreds of years to actually almost 1,000 years to the 19th century United States of America. Now, if you know anything about this time, it is not a great time in United States of America history. This is the century where the Civil War takes place, the Trail of Tears, the Gilded Age, Reconstruction. All in all, not a great time. So today we are talking about one of what I would consider is one of the most heroic and courageous figures of this century, and that is Harriet Tubman.
Yes, absolutely.
So just for our historical overview, as we know, Harriet Tubman was a freed slave during the 19th century. She would later then become an abolitionist and social activist. She was most famous for her work with the hidden network known as the Underground Railroad, which she would use to free over 70 slaves personally, many of them members of her own family. So that's what we know about Harriet Tubman. Like, this is probably what you learned in history class when you covered this and everything like that. You would just know that she was a freed slave who went back and helped other slaves get free through the use of the Underground Railroad. Similar to George Washington, at least from a United States history, this is a big character, one that we learn about, probably a big name of American history in that. So I thought I would get some little lesser known facts. They're still known. They're still very much part of our history, but we just sometimes don't talk about them as much as we talk about her involvement with the Underground Railroad and everything like that. So she is originally born as Araminta Ross. In her early life, she would suffer a traumatic head wound at the hands of an overseer. This would cause her to suffer from hypersomnia, which is like the opposite of insomnia. It is basically that you either sleep too much, you have excessive tiredness. A lot of this would cause this for the majority of her life. Interesting enough, according to her history, after this injury, she documents that she began experiencing strange visions and vivid dreams, which she ascribed to premonitions from God. Now, I want to put a pin in that for a minute because I want to talk about that later when we talk about Assassin's Creed involvement. So she would also help John Brown recruit men for his raid on Harper's Ferry. Now, Harper's Ferry was a raid on a plantation that was led with slaves and it meant to like free slaves and do all of this. It was one of many raids that would happen, rebellions, other things like that, similar to the Nat Turner rebellions. A lot of stuff would happen there. Also, little known, after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, which if you're not familiar with American history, the Fugitive Slave Act was an act that was passed that basically allowed Southern plantation owners to go into the northern states where slavery was illegal and take back their escaped slaves. It said they had a right to take them back and capture them if they could find them. It was a real loss for the abolitionist movement because at the time with the Underground Railroad, they were getting, once slaves got to the north, they couldn't be taken back because slavery was illegal in the northern states.
But the Fugitive Slave Act is really like the turning point in the abolition movement because while yes, it's really bad, like obviously it allowed slave owners to recapture slaves, it also really is kind of the thing that started heightening abolition, that the abolition movement generally, because so many people were opposed to it. It led, I mean, really, truthfully, if the act had not passed, the Civil War probably would not have happened, at least in the way it happened. So it is a really significant piece of legislation that, yes, is terrible, but also led to a lot of people joining the abolition movement.
Yeah, and we talk about the Civil War, and I'm just going to say that the way we talk about the Civil War, at least in American history, and even I'm sure in other countries, this war is immensely complicated and builds up since the beginning of the country. There's just a lot going into it, and we talk a lot about the compromises, the election of Abraham Lincoln, all of these things that forced the slaveholding states, the Confederate states, to rebel. But the Fugitive Slave Act is really one thing that also leads to the Civil War, but in the opposite way as we normally talk about the causes of the Civil War. So that's a big thing. So when this act is passed, to get back to the point I was going to make, she would continue work with the Underground Railroad, extending it into the British territory of Canada, which would allow for them to be freed because then they're leaving the country. So again, she continues to help secure passage for slaves trying to escape their enslavement. So when the Civil War begins in the 1860s, she actually works for the Union Army, first as a cook and then a nurse, and then as an armed scout and spy. Now, this is one thing that I found so interesting when I researched this. For her guidance at the raid at Combahee Ferry, which liberated more than 700 enslaved people, she is widely credited as the first woman to lead an armed military operation in the United States. It's impressive.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think a lot of times we think about, especially the women of this era, women of the abolition movement, we think of them as like, oh, like they didn't fight, they didn't They weren't, armed. They weren't violent, but that could not be further from the truth.
Yes, there were people of resistance, people of all walks of life participated in all kinds of things. It just, what we talk about is often like what was the norm, what was normal for these people. But it didn't mean that when you're talking about like history and social sciences and other things like that, it's not really an exact thing in that like the norm does not mean that there were not people who were abnormal. And that's important to remember when we talk about Assassin's Creed in general, when we're talking about like anyone can do anything at any point in history, as long as what really comes about it is when you start making technological advancements that didn't happen during the time. But a woman could, in theory, attempt to do anything. Now, the likelihood is another question, but they could.
And I also think, when we talk about norms, when we talk about the status quo, when we talk about the expectations that society places on people, not just women, not just, any certain race, but people generally, there are expectations that were placed on people and still are. And the thing about the assassins is so often the people they work with and the people that become assassins do not fit those norms and refuse to fit those norms and cannot fit those norms. And that's a good thing for the assassins. It helps them. Oftentimes it helps them blend in. And so I would venture to guess that most of the people that we meet in the assassins do not fit the norms. I think Ezio is a very clear outlier in this case. It just so happens that he's the one we most associate with the assassins, not that most of the assassins fit the norms in the way that he does. And I think that's really important to remember, especially when we talk about women being part of the assassins, prior to the modern era.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so. I agree with everything that you have said there. And so the last thing that I have for her is after the war, she retires to the family home on a property she had purchased in 1859, which is like right before the war starts, in Auburn, New York, where she cared for her aging parents. She was active in women's suffrage movement until illness overtook her and she was admitted into a home for elderly African Americans, which she had helped establish years earlier. And I just like talking about her before we kind of go to our mid break, and then we'll talk about Assassin's Creed. I already had so much respect for Harriet Tubman, just as a general, but doing the research more, like this woman was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reading on her Wikipedia page earlier, just in preparation for this episode. And there are so many things that I learned, like she was nicknamed Moses for the leading people out of slavery. And if you're not familiar, the story of Moses from the Bible is one of the most important stories in the Bible. And what does Moses do? Well, Moses is a Jewish child who is adopted by Pharaoh and his family and finds out about his heritage and leads the enslaved Israelites out of slavery. And so, that having that as her nickname is very much an honor, obviously, to her, but is also very much saying, look at how important this person is. Look at how much this person has done for our enslaved people. But also, there are just so many other things that I learned about her that is like, wow, this is amazing. Like, she didn't found the Underground Railroad, but she was just such a major worker and proponent of it and helped probably thousands. I don't know if we have like a number of people that she helped escape, probably not, but so many people. And she killed people in the process of getting these people to safety. So that's badass alone. And then Austin, I'm sure some of our listeners will not care, but this is interesting to us because her faith, she was part of one of the Methodist denominations of Christianity. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yes, it's really interesting because like if you don't know the Methodist history, which a lot of you probably don't, but they split over the issue of slavery about 30 years before the Civil War breaks out. And so she gets this upbringing in a denomination that has already split and infighting and continues.
She was friends with like all of these other abolitionists like Frederick Douglass. And, there are others too, which is just like, of course she was. But I think in America, we often learn about these people distinct from each other. We don't learn about like, oh, Frederick Douglass was friends with all these other people and like knew all of them, but you know, they were, and that's significant.
Yeah, very much so. And like, I think what was really interesting, and I knew this in the back of my mind, but when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, like this wasn't in the front of my mind. But her involvement in the suffrage movement, I think, is just a really testament to her character, of that she's elderly at this point, and honestly, she could retire and say, oh, I'm not going to get involved with this. I've done my time. And no one could really blame her for that. But she says, no, this is the same principles that I've stood for my entire life. So here I am. I'm going to do this as long as I'm physically able.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think something that should be mentioned is that the suffrage movement was inherently very racist. Like, Susan B. Anthony and the other white wealthy women who kind of founded the movement, they wanted to exclude freed Black slaves for obvious reasons, for racism, for classism. But, you know, it was so important to have people like Harriet Tubman. I'm sure there were others, Ida B. Wells for one, that participated in that and said, no, like that we want this too. This is for us as well. And so it's just meaningful.
Right. And like, I think it's important to note with Harriet Tubman in this, like how recent in the terms of long-term history her time is. She dies in the 20th century. And
that's
so,
in the 1900s for those of you who are like, when's that?
Yeah. So like, that's not, I mean, I know like the beginning of the 1900s is over 120 years ago now, but still that's relatively soon.
It is. And I think it's, I'm sure people have talked about this ad nauseum, but like slavery was not that long ago. Reconstruction was not that long ago. Women's suffrage was not that long ago. I mean, some of these things within a couple generations, people remembered, like desegregation, not that long ago. It should be said, there are places that are still not desegregated, right? But yeah, I mean, there was something I read one time, or maybe it was a TikTok, but if you know about U.S. President John Tyler, who was the president in like the 1840s, I think, he had a grandson that was still alive in the 2000s. Like, that's crazy. I mean, he had the son when he was really old, and his son had a son when he was really old, whatever. So like, that's right. A little bit of not a norm, but still, I mean, these things did not happen as long ago as you think.
Right. And like my parents, I mean, were children, but they lived through, you know, civil rights. They were born in the 60s. And so they lived through all of that. My great grandmother was born in 1912. And so she saw everything. Mm-hmm. And that's only 3 generations above me.
Right. Also, I looked it up, and John Tyler's grandson is named Harrison Ruffin Tyler, and he is still alive today in 2024. Yes, he is 95, but he is still alive.
But anyway, we're a little off topic now. So I think we can go to the mid-break, and then we'll talk about Assassin's Creed involvement, and then we'll talk about Assassin or Templar.
All right, let's get into the mid-break.
Make your next vacation unforgettable on Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Star of the Seas. It's everything you've loved about every family vacation you've ever been on, with mind-blowing thrills at the largest water park at sea, 7 onboard pools for every level of chill, more than 40 ways to dine and drink, and even more to enjoy at our award-winning private island, Perfect Day at Coco Cay. This is the new Star of the Seas. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
Want to live better?
We've got a lot of work to do.
Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live better now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live better now. Now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.
Hit pause on whatever you're listening to and hit play on your next adventure. Stay 2 nights and get a $50 Best Western gift card. Life's a trip. Make the most of it at Best Western. Visit bestwestern.com for complete terms and conditions.
Ma cos'è? quiet carriage you got there. Where did you buy it, if you don't mind me asking?
Ask all you want, Freddie. You'll never get an answer.
Damn it all. Was it my eyebrows?
Yes, and your face, voice, and body.
What have you done? We used them. They were not ready for firing. You could have gotten us all killed. Let me see. His breath is more fatal than our cannons. Only when you two fools are shooting them. There, try it.
Welcome to the middle of the show, and this is where we talk about all the things that have to do with the Lorecast and not the lore of Assassin's Creed. So the first thing that we do is thank all of our patrons. Thank you all so much. We appreciate all of you so much. You definitely help us keep making the podcast, help us keep the lights on, all of that kind of stuff. The best way to support us is financially. It helps us buy new equipment and do new programming and, just all kinds of things that help us. And if you do join the Patreon, you will get your name read out on the next episode after you join. And at certain tiers, you can even come on the show and hang out with us on patron chats. We always have a ton of fun. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely check it out at patreon.com/AC-Lorecast. And if you can't support us financially, we do understand that the next best way to support us is by leaving us a rating or a review. You can now leave comments on Spotify. And this one does come from Spotify, who commented on a patron chat episode about new games and what historical eras they should be set in. And this one is from Caboose's Blue and said, I would like to see a native-based game that details the true story of the colonists forcing Native Americans from their land, like the Trail of Tears era. That would be super interesting. Thank you so much for leaving that comment. And then the last thing I have to tell you about is our Discord server. We've got a ton of people over there. We have a bunch of fun. We talk about Assassin's Creed. We talk about Dragon Age. We talk about Star Wars. We talk about all the fandoms. And as there are multiple games coming out in the third and fourth quarters of this year, we're talking a lot about Dragon Age the Veilguard and Assassin's Creed Shadows. So if you're interested in news or updates or just theorizing, tinfoil hatting, if you will, about either of those games, our Discord server is the place for you. So definitely come check it out. All the links to all the things we've talked about are in the episode description. So Austin, I think we are ready to get back into it.
This episode brought to you by MGM Plus. From executive producer Stephen King and an executive producer of Frog comes The Institute, a chilling new original series from MGM Plus. Kidnapped and trapped in a sinister facility, gifted teen Luke Ellis must join other children to fight for their survival. Starring Emmy Award winner Mary Louise Parker, Ben Barnes, and introducing Joe Freeman. The Institute, premiering July 13th on MGM Plus.
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Xyzal is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Xyzal keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Xyzal. At night.
Your earbud fell in a coffee cup. You need a taco pick-me-up. When modern life gets rough, grab the timeless taste you love. Paso, the old El Paso.
Malaka! Malaka! Malaka!
But that madman, the self-proclaimed Bishop of the Ruins, is our biggest critic. He calls our playing the devil's bagpipes.
I will sleep with anyone as long as they agree to be executed in the morning.
Like Xantivis.
He was well satisfied with his bargain. Who is this toothsome fellow?
My queen, this is,
Well?
It is a generous offer, but I've already pledged my life to this woman.
Aya, you have chosen well.
So, for Harriet Tubman's Assassin's Creed involvement, there is none. In fact, there is no Assassin's Creed fandom wiki entry for Harriet Tubman or the Underground Railroad. There is one story from the Civil War, which is in the Assassin's Creed Last Descendants young adult novel. And that takes place during the Civil War. But that is mainly focused on the Union's efforts to get a piece of Eden, which is through the assassins and all of that stuff. And so that's it. We know that these events did happen in Assassin's Creed just because it's our history, and sometimes they are briefly mentioned in conversation. The events like the Civil War, the Underground Railroad, everything like that are mentioned, but we don't know exactly what the players are and who's moving what or doing what. When the Civil War does break out, for the most part, Templars are on the Confederate side and assassins are on the Union side, for the most part. I think it's important to discuss that while there's not involvement of this historical character, there is involvement of other historical characters. And like Assassin's Creed, similar to World War II, the who's on what side is not as simple as Union leaders are the good guys and Confederate leaders are the bad guys. Though 99% of the time, the Confederate leaders are the bad guys because they want to own people. Like, that's very simple. I think it's not a question of good guys versus bad guys. I think when we're talking about historical figures, especially in this time, especially like those in power, I'm not talking about people like Harriet Tubman or Frederick Douglass or people who are on the ground in the abolitionist movement. I'm talking about people who sit in seats of power. You're talking about bad guys versus, at best, morally gray guys.
Yeah, and I mean, I do agree with you. I think that just the nature of this war and World War II is because of the reason for the war. It lends itself to, okay, the Templars are the bad guys and the assassins are the good guys. Like, obviously, the Templars are going to want to, or maybe not want to enslave people, but they will not have problems with slavery. They will not have ethical concerns over slavery because at the end of the day, they believe in slavery. The Templars believe that people should be controlled and enslaved and made to do what the Templars want them to do. That's the whole basis of their philosophy. So to me, it would not make sense for a Templar, at least a law-abiding, down for the cause Templar, to have any ethical qualms with slavery whatsoever. Whereas an assassin totally would. Like, there should be no reason why an assassin would ever be part of the Confederacy unless they were leaving or undercover or something like that. But that leads me into another point, which is that I'm not sure this era or the World War II era will ever be portrayed in Assassin's Creed for this reason, because the sides are so very clear. This is who the Templars would side with, and this is who the assassins would side with. Because I think that Ubisoft very much wants to tell stories that are more in the gray, that are more, this is complicated. This is a situation where sometimes the Templars might be on the, quote, right side of history, and sometimes it might be the assassins. So I don't necessarily think Ubisoft wants to tell stories that are very clearly delineated into good guys, bad guys. I think they want it to be more ambiguous, which I understand because it does make a better story.
Right. I could see them doing this story in like a more Assassin's Creed, the first Assassin's Creed, where it's like, we want an end to this conflict. We're not really on anyone's side, other than they would be on the Union side, but they're striving for the freedom of people and an end to the conflict is where I think Assassins would be. But I could see them portraying Templars on the Union side in a similar thing of when they, similar to how the Templars switched to the Patriot side halfway through Assassin's Creed 3, when they see that Britain's likely going to lose this war, the Confederates are likely going to lose this war, and so they want to make sure they have people in power and whatever comes into that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. For me, I feel like Assassins, like, they wouldn't even be on the Union side. Like, I feel like Assassins would be so into the abolition movement. Like, you cannot convince me that John Brown is not an assassin. Cannot convince me.
No. And this kind of segues into what will not be much of a discussion, because there isn't even a shred of evidence in Harriet Tubman's historical thing that would even suggest she would even entertain the idea of being a Templar. I do think one thing that I want to talk about before I talk about why she's the poster child for the Assassin's Brotherhood. Furthermore, I want to talk about these visions that she gets after her injury. I think it could be something that if Ubisoft were ever to do this period of time, I think they could do the Civil War and there would be a way to do this right. But it would be very tricky, which it makes sense why they wouldn't do this. But it would be interesting to see if something like maybe an overseer hits her with a piece of Eden. Maybe she's an Isu sage and these visions that she's getting are old memories that are from who she was before. I think there's a lot of potential in her story for this. I mean, really, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, all these people are ripe, perfect people to become historical figures in this time period for the Assassins to either be a part of Assassins or Assassin allies. And I think that, she frees slaves. She frees slaves after the United States government says, hey, you can bring slaves back. She helps a rebellion. She's not above that. She's a spy. She's a scout. Learning about Harriet Tubman kind of makes me feel like she is the perfect successor of Bayek of Siwa.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, and I don't disagree.
I don't think that she needs to be the protagonist of a game, and we'll see how Shadows having an actual historical figure as a protagonist, it breaks immersion a little bit when you're playing as someone who actually lived in history that we know of versus playing this other unknown figure who is just present for all of these events. I think it allows you to be immersed a little bit more. But that being said, I'm very excited for that game. And so I don't think she necessarily needs to be the protagonist, but I do think that this time period does need to be represented more. Whether or not, maybe not a main game, but through novels, through comics, through all kinds of stuff going on there. I just think it's really important.
I do agree with you. I do very much agree with you on that front. And I think that she could be a really important, really fascinating character in a game, even as a mentor figure. But I very much agree with you. There's no way that she would ever be a Templar. There's just no possible way. But I think the visions also would be a really interesting place to build a story from.
And I could say, she lives a long time. And so even if you did a game set during the women's suffrage movement, and obviously that's the same time as Prohibition. So there's a lot of ripe opportunity for a more diverse story in Prohibition, in women's suffrage. But you could still have her be that kind of mentor-y figure, almost like Achilles or something like that. And then we could learn her story and her involvement and what is going on through that. Maybe not seeing the actual Civil War, but still having her around, I think, is another possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was just looking it up. She lives from 1820 to 1913. She was 93 when she died. So she lives almost 100 years. I mean, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm. Harriet Tubman and my grandmother were alive my great grandmother were alive at the same time. She was
crazy.
One. But that's really all I got, unless you have any other thoughts you want to share about Harriet Tubman.
No, I think this is a really interesting topic, and she would be a great addition to the Assassin's Creed universe for sure, as would many, 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 many characters in this time period. This is kind of the area that I specialized my history minor in. So, hey, Ubisoft, if you're listening, I have some more ideas. Hit us up.
Definitely.
All right, let's do it. As always, Austin, thank you so much for doing the research and putting the notes together. This was a fascinating topic and one that I've been looking forward to for a while. So thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at AC Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions or topics to unpack, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. Find us on patreon.com/Assassin's Creed Lorecast. The Assassin's Creed Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode's description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, make sure you give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. And always remember, Assassins, stay in the shadows to serve the light.
Have you ever wanted to deep dive into the lore and stories behind all your favorite Marvel movies? Then do we have the show for you? I'm Captain Shenko.
And I'm Psych88. Join us as we dissect the media megalith that is the MCU. We'll talk about the origin stories, the fights, and everything in between.
The MCU Lorecast releases on all major podcasting platforms on Mondays as part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club and can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.